What's going on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music. Today I want to talk about this record right here. This is Julien Dyne's Teal, released on Wonderful Noise Records in Japan, Soundway Records everywhere else in the world. This was one of the last records of 2018 that I really wanted to get my hands on. I'm a big fan of Julien Dyne's music, and this was a record that was really hard to get a hold of towards the end of last year, as it was pretty much sold out everywhere. But towards the beginning of this year, I was finally able to get my hands on it, and since then, I've given it quite a few listens, and I think I'm finally ready to share my thoughts and opinions of this record with you guys and let you know whether or not I think it's worth checking out. So, that little introduction out of the way, let's talk about this guy. For those of you who are unfamiliar with who Julien Dyne is, he is a DJ, producer, multi-instrumentalist, and visual artist who has been going for quite some time. I think he sort of started coming to prominence towards the end of the 2000s, and you might actually know him more from his contributions to Lord Echo's music, as he's featured as a percussionist and drummer on a lot of those records. But you may not be as familiar with a lot of his solo work, which is a shame, because some of his solo work is actually some of the most underappreciated instrumental hip-hop and electronic music that's out there. Specifically, his first album, Pins and Digits, is one of my favorites, and I actually talked about this record in 2017 as it being one of my favorite records of that year. As well as his 2013 record, December, which I still think is one of the finest, most underappreciated Flying Lotus-esque instrumental hip-hop records out there. Although it's not really strictly instrumental hip-hop, but I mean, that's sort of like the broad framework that I would use to describe this record. Between the release of this album and this album right here, Julien Dyne had put out a record with collaborator Lord Echo on this project right here, this record, Lord Julien, and it was just a 2-song single or EP, whatever you want to classify it as, but I really liked the sound that they were going for on this record. It seemed to marry a lot of the sounds and influences that both these guys are into, so there's this marriage of a little bit of Afro jazz, house music, disco, and electronic music all just coming together to make a very playful and really cool 2-track single EP. After hearing this, I was really hoping that either Lord Echo or Julien Dyne would sort of take this sound and expand it over the course of an entire album. Consequently, that is exactly what Julien Dyne did with this record. Compared to Julien Dyne's previous works, there is nary a trace of hip-hop on this record. The majority of this record is an up-tempo dance record, and I think in an interview, Julien Dyne even said the process of creating this record, he really wanted something that would be easy to work into DJ sets. And I can totally tell that he succeeded in that mission, because this is easily the most up-tempo, dance floor friendly record that Julien Dyne has made yet. His previous works were definitely a lot moodier and a lot more brooding and atmospheric. This album has pretty much none of that. The general vibe on this record is very playful, very fun, very energetic, and it definitely feels like it could get a dance floor moving. Maybe not for like the super strict house heads, but I could definitely see myself getting down to this record. So overall, there's a ton of really cool grooves on here. Julien Dyne's drumming gets mixed in with a lot of electronics. There's a lot of synths. And in terms of the synths on here, in general, they're all really just playful, colorful, upbeat, and just really positive and really sort of uplifting. There really isn't like a sad or dour moment on this record. Overall, this is just one of those records that it's nice to listen to because it's just so positive, and it kind of makes you feel good at the end of the day. But not only that, feels like there's a lot of creative energy going on this record as well. Like I said, with all the different synths and all the different instrumentation that pops up throughout this record, there's just a genuine feeling of Julien Dyne and all of his collaborators on this record are really just in the studio playing around and having fun. 4 to the Floor is definitely sort of the framework for a lot of the tracks on here, although that's not necessarily the case for all the tracks. It also seems like it's been melded a lot with Julien Dyne's punchy, hard-hitting drums that still have a certain finesse to them, which you can tell is him infusing his love of Afro jazz into the mix. And also you can tell that there's little elements of sort of new disco popping in here, but way more interesting than your average new disco track. The tempo varies basically from like mid-tempo to high tempo, although mid-tempo seems to be the majority of the tracks on here. There's a lot of electronic sounds in here mixed in with some live instrumentation, and a few vocalists pop up as well. Like I played at the beginning of this video, the track Hours featuring his bandmate Lady Six is definitely an album highlight on here. I really like her vocal contribution to the track, and I really love Julien Dyne's funky shuffling drums on this song. The other tracks on here don't really have as much vocals going on, but what it lacks in vocalists, it makes up with extremely catchy melodies and just an overall positive vibe that makes this album a joy to listen to. Some of the other highlight tracks on here include Design, which opens the album up and really gives you sort of the framework that the album works with. And then other highlights include PF Mogul, Copernicus, Hot Shoe. And then the last 3 tracks are some of my favorites on here. Steady, the album title track Teal, and Follow You Round are just all full of these really cool, catchy melodies. For an album that's largely instrumental, it's surprisingly memorable, and it's surprisingly a record with some infectious melodies that get stuck in your head. So many different instruments pop up throughout this record, including tons of different keyboard, hand percussion, vibraphone, and there's just a whole multitude of instrumentation going on this record, and it all feels really natural mixing in with all the different electronic sounds on here. Quite honestly, I don't know what else to say about it. A few little nitpicks that I have about this record: I'm not a huge fan of the one other vocal track on here with Mara TK, What You Say. I don't really like the overall feel of the groove on that track, and I don't know, it just honestly, I guess it's more of a personal taste thing. Honestly, it's not one of my favorite tracks, and it's honestly the one track on here that I end up skipping the most. It's not a deal breaker, and it's definitely not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not my favorite track compared to all the other songs that are on here. And then I would also say that there are a few points where it seems like some of the tracks start to blend together a little bit, but again, that's also not a deal breaker for me because it doesn't detract from the overall enjoyability of this record, but it does sometimes make you double take as to what song you are on the album. But overall, I really like this album. I love Julien Dyne's mix of electronic music, dance music, jazz, Afro jazz, and a little bit of new disco all coming together to make this wholly unique sound. And honestly, this probably would have made it onto my favorite records of 2018 had I managed to pick it up last year. But as it stands, this is one of the best records I've heard in a while. Really enjoyed it, and definitely Julien Dyne's Teal comes highly recommended from me. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you've checked this record out, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. If you want to hear more from this record, please head over to my WordPress or Steemit blogs, because that's where I post music links to any of the records that I talk about this channel. Also, make sure you head over to my Mixcloud so you can check out Raw Select Radio, which is basically the audio component of Raw Select Music. So you can hear records such as this, plus all the other records that I don't get a chance to talk about on this channel. Links for everything, as always, down in the description. But that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you in the next one. So until then, peace out!